Several people were on the ground nearby, evidently injured by the explosion. A girl in a hoodie was crouched among them, doing her best to tend their injuries. The girl is Miku Morita. While walking along, upset at Minorikawa for not introducing her to an Aiki Jiu-Jitsu dojo, she happened to cross the aftermath of a minivan explosion. Unable to stand idly by when faced with such a horrific scene, she pitched in as best she could to help the wounded. Kano recognized her as the girl he'd talked to earlier during the traffic jam. "Police," he announced. "Get back, let me handle this." The girl was visibly relieved. "Help her," she said. She pointed to a figure lying on the sidewalk a short distance from the burning minivan. It was a Middle Eastern girl. She appeared to be unconscious. "I think she got hurt rescuing another girl, about college age," the girl in the hoodie said. Okay, so this is gonna be complicated if she gets in custody of Kano and such. She might actually try and, break loose, because I get the feeling she doesn't trust the police. And maybe rightfully so, I don't know. We're not quite sure about that yet. A college-aged girl. That might be a Tomi. "What happened to the girl she saved?" Kano asked. The Good Samaritan looked around. "Huh? Where'd she go?" The rescuee had disappeared. "This girl here," the girl in the hoodie gestured down toward the fallen girl. "I can't believe how fast she was." She spoke with a hint of awe. "The way she moved to get to that other girl. She was on a level way beyond mine." Kano took another look at the injured girl. Her figure looked rather delicate. It was hard to believe she was capable of great feats of athleticism. He started toward her, but Stanley stepped ahead of him. "Leave this one to me," he said. His expression was unusually stern, even for him. "Do you know her?" Kano asked. The American didn't answer as he checked the girl's pulse and then her pupils. "Hey, Stanley. Don't you have other things you should be doing?" Stanley snapped. "No, we really don't want to let her be alone with this guy." Fine then, Kano decided to collect some eyewitness accounts. But I guess it's not going to give us a choice. Patrol cars and ambulances arrived at the scene in a steady stream. Once the vehicle fire was under control, things gradually began to calm down. Several officers worked to cover the area around the burned minivan with a blue tarp. Kano got his questioning underway, starting by flashing his badge at a man near the front of the crowd. "Excuse me, would you mind answering a few questions?" The man puffed himself up. "How about you answered a few questions for me? Was this an accident or an attack?" "We still don't know many details," Kano admitted. The man shoved his finger in Kano's face. "Let me rephrase that for you. This is a major incident." And of course it's him. "Huh?" "I've been around the block a few times, and I know all your police PR lingo. And when you start talking about the details, that is 100% indicative of a major incident." I was gonna try and skip ahead there, because I felt like we've seen this before, but now I remember we heard it from his perspective. "Well, I sure picked the wrong guy to try to talk to." Stifling his frustration, Kano continued his questioning. "Did you happen to notice anything unusual prior to the explosion?" "Unusual? Now that you mention it, I think I heard a cell phone ringtone." "A ringtone? No, never mind, forget that. There's no way the ringtone on someone's phone would be audible through all that." The man was probably right, but somehow the idea nagged at Kano. He jotted down a note in his pad. Kano. It was Stanley. Perfect timing. Thank you for your cooperation, Kano told the man. Then he hurried on his way. Did she get away? Stanley stepped in close enough to whisper. Who was that guy? An eyewitness to the explosion, apparently. Did he have any info? He said he heard a cell phone ringtone at the time of the explosion. Not sure if that's significant, though. Stanley stood silently for a moment, thinking. What about that girl? Kano asked. Has she woken up? No. I'm gonna drive her to the hospital. Huh? Why do that yourself? Just look around, Stanley said. He cast his eyes out over the scene. There were still many injured people lying on the roadside. It seemed the authorities hadn't sent enough ambulances. Okay, so he's being really secretive. He's not going to tell Kano that that was Kanan. But isn't your car back in Maruyamacho? Kano asked. Under these circumstances, I think it makes sense for me to go back for it. Under the circumstances, I think it makes sense for me to go back for it, Stanley replied coolly. Besides, I have a few things I'd like to ask her. Kano was curious. You do? He asked. Stanley's cell rang. Yes, Stanley answered the phone in English. As he listened, his demeanor changed. The blood drained from his face, and his hand began to tremble slightly as it gripped the phone. Kano had never seen him this shaken up. You got it, Stanley said at last. He hung up the phone and let out a sigh. What is it? Kano asked. Stanley headed into an alley without responding. Kano hurried after him. Once they were out of earshot of the crowd, Stanley finally spoke. That call right now is from Gordon, my superior. He broke off there, and for a long while, was silent. He appeared to be struggling with some strong emotion. Well, we definitely want to hear it. And it doesn't seem like he's unwilling to tell us, so let's ask. Kano was getting impatient. What is it? If you're going to tell me something, then tell me. All right, Stanley said at last. I can trust you with this. Wow, never thought I'd hear you say that. Or say you trust me, Kano teased. But Stanley's expression remained dead serious. We were contacted on our end by the mastermind of this plot. Those international criminals you mentioned? Correct. Roughly 8 hours ago, they infected Maria Osawa with the UA virus. Then, they let her loose somewhere in Shibuya. Hold on. By UA, you mean... Kano thought back to his earlier conversation with Stanley. These criminals were trying to get their hands on a new drug. An antiviral drug developed by Kenji Osawa that had been shown to be effective against the UA virus. Stanley hesitated before continuing. This is a killer virus with a 100% mortality rate once it takes hold. Kenji Osawa's antiviral is our only means of combating it. Mortality rate of 100%. It has an incubation period of 12 hours. In another 4 hours, Maria Osawa will go symptomatic. After that, she'll begin spreading the virus through the city. It's capable of airborne transmission. Following the onset of symptoms, individuals infected with the UA virus bleed from the lungs, and the virus is readily released into the air via coughing. The UA virus is highly resilient in the open air, and can survive even after saliva or other fluids have evaporated. Simply getting within 2 meters of a symptomatic patient is said to carry a high risk of infection. bodily fluids from deceased patients carry an especially high concentration of the virus, and anything contaminated with such fluids must be thoroughly sterilized before it's safe. Stanley nodded. If we don't administer Kenji Osawa's antiviral before she develops symptoms? Yes? Kana's voice was trembling now. Stanley spoke with complete certainty. Everyone in Shibuya is going to die. Well, then we need to find Maria Osawa and get the antiviral to her as soon as possible, Kano said, panicking. Stanley remained cool. Oh, just calm down, there's more to the story than... Stanley was interrupted by a strange sound from the upper floors of a nearby building. Unsure of what it was, the two men hurriedly relocated. They paused when they came to a vacant lot. The place was deserted. No need to worry about being overheard here. You said there was more to the story, Kano prompted. The antiviral in question is stored in Kenji Osawa's laboratory. The lab is protected by a sophisticated security system, and apparently the storage area where the drug is kept requires fingerprint authentication for both Osawa and Tanaka. What? But Tanaka's... Kano couldn't help but gasp. Tanaka was currently a fugitive, the prime suspect in the kidnapping case. There was no chance of getting any fingerprint authorization from him at this stage. Is there any other way to get in? Kano asked. Well, the door can also be unlocked via password in place of the fingerprint scanner, but we'd still need to know what Tanaka chose for his password. I mean, they're the police, can't they just, blow it up? This is, a very emergency situation. I don't think they're gonna care about the bill afterwards. No. In any event, Stanley said, it's essential that we track down and secure Maria. But, he went on, his voice grave, even if we get Maria to safety, the mastermind is now in possession of the Uwa virus. If they want to, they can unleash a bioterrorist attack on Shibuya at any time. To put it bluntly, the lives of every man, woman, and child in this city are in their hands. Kano felt a pulse of fear deep enough to give him vertigo. He slowly tilted his back, his head, and gazed at the sky. Vast and blue as always. I think that's meant to be tilted back his head. There had to be tens of thousands of people in Shibuya right now. Rumi and Shizuo were among them. And they still might all be dead, and they might all be dead within a day. It felt so unreal. Kano's mind almost couldn't process it. With an effort of will, he shook himself out of his daze. Now is no time to waver. We have to try, he said. In the next 4 hours, we need to find Maria Osawa, and figure out a way to stop this mastermind and the Uwa virus. The words were as much for himself as they were for his companion. Let's do this, Stanley. We might not always see eye to eye, but together I feel like you and I can find a way. But Stanley averted his gaze. My job here is simply to apprehend the mastermind. Kano felt a resurgence of his earlier anger at Stanley. Once again, he was putting his duties above human life. I'm sorry. Stanley's voice was a quiet mutter. You should get away from Shibuya as soon as possible, Kano. Kano hadn't imagined that the American would ever be worried for him. I appreciate the warning, he said, but I'm seeing this through to the end. This isn't the sort of thing you can solve with just an effort of willpower. Even so, giving up isn't the Japanese detective way. Stanley let out a nasal chuckle. Back to that again, are we? Same to you. Kano managed a tiny chuckle of his own. Listen, Stanley went on after a moment. This is just between you and me. The mastermind behind this kidnapping case is an arms dealer who goes by the name Alphard. Huh. Is that A, the one who sent an email to, Tanaka? Or not Tanaka, but, Kenji. Beyond simply selling weapons, illegal arms dealers are also frequently involved in smuggling weapons unlawfully obtained through deals with government or military contacts. In recent years, such enterprises have become increasingly globalized. Some dealers form smuggling networks that also deal in money laundering, drug trafficking, and more. Alphard. The attempted bioterrorist attack on Kasumigaseki, a hotel bombing in Chicago. Alphard had a hand in all of them. What do you know about this criminal? Kano asked. Stanley's expression grew even darker. Alphard's signature is extremely meticulous planning. But I don't mean meticulous in the same way you or I might normally think of it. Their plans are perfectly imperfect. Do you get what I mean? Kano shook his head. Alphard deliberately engineers accidents to make things complicated and unpredictable. It's difficult to get a good grasp of what's going on when the situation seems to be falling apart. People tend not to consider that coincidental mishaps might be anything but. In the end, they don't even realize they were playing right into the mastermind's hands all along. Kano could hear the intensity in Stanley's voice. I'm afraid that's all I can say. Stanley held out his right hand. See you around, Kano. If we're still alive. If we're still alive. Kano let that sink in for a moment. Nah, I'll shake your hand after we finish this case. With a slight smile, Stanley withdrew his hand. Then the two bumped fists instead. Alright, we'll meet again, Kano. I'm sure of it. Yeah, see you then. No sooner had Stanley departed than Kuze's voice came in over the wireless. Attention all units. As of now, further investigation on the kidnapping case is suspended. The director's voice sounded strangely cold. I repeat, as of now, further investigation on the kidnapping case is suspended. Wait, hold on, sir! Kano shouted. What is it, Kano? Could you let us know why? We received information that Maria Osawa has been infected with an unknown virus and has been released somewhere in Shibuya. That matched up with what Stanley had said earlier. An anti-bioterrorism security force will probably be deployed in Shibuya. This is no longer a simple kidnapping case. Our part in this is finished. Terrorism involving biological agents such as bacteria or viruses. Biological weapons are easier to acquire and transport than nuclear weapons, and because they rely on an organism's natural ability to proliferate or infect, they can yield powerful results for low effort. For these reasons, recent years have seen widespread apprehension about the possibility that such weapons might be used by terrorists. In the event that a bioterrorist attack occurred in Japan, temporary quarantine and decontamination facilities will be set up in the area affected. No, it's not. We haven't managed to resolve anything. Kano, I assure you everyone else feels the same as you do. Kuze's voice had a cautionary tone. They're still performing the autopsy on the body found in the blue minivan that exploded. I'll let you know once we have a positive ID. Kuze out. Director. The line had already gone dead. Left at a loss, Kano gazed out at the cityscape. The sight of the bombed vehicle had calmed down briefly, but now that the news networks had begun reporting, the herd of onlookers was growing. There was also a sizable crowd gathering outside of a large home electronics store. The large LCD televisions on display were showing a press conference being held by the governor of Tokyo. Well, let's watch the broadcast for now, but we might have to go back and pick this one later. We'll see. Kano might learn something about the case. He decided to watch the broadcast. Working closely with the administration, we're keeping a careful eye on the situation as it develops. The governor's expression was solemn as he spoke. The moment he finished his statement, the reporters bombarded him with questions. This seems similar to the bioterrorist attack on Kasumi Giseki 2 years ago. Is there any possible connection? What countermeasures do we have in the event that Shibuya is the target of bioterrorism? The governor was visibly disconcerted. If this does turn out to be a bioterrorist attack, we will establish emergency shelters with a large-scale quarantine station at Yoyogi Park. However, there are still many details that remain unknown. The politician was clearly struggling to maintain his composure. Can you comment on the rumors we're hearing that Shibuya might be blockaded off? Don't be ridiculous, the governor barked. What outlet are you with? Are you trying to start a panic when we don't know all the details? Besides, it wouldn't even be possible to blockade the whole of Shibuya. The press conference continued. The governor and the reporters locked in a belligerent back and forth. Kano left the electronics store and headed for the cafe where Rumi and Shizuo were waiting. He had to tell them both to get far away from Shibuya. Café Lautrec seemed quiet when Kano arrived. Shizuo was sitting alone. Kano scanned the establishment but didn't see Rumi anywhere. One of the staff greeted him. Welcome. Just one, sir. No, I'm meeting someone, actually. Of course, sir. The hostess smiled and then went on her way. Shizuo was glaring at him. Kano walked over to him and bowed deeply. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. I'm Shinya Kano. You look like even more of a knuckle-dragger than I thought. Shizuo maintained his appraising stare. Rumi had something she needed to do, so she stepped away for a while, he said after a long moment. Kano sat down across from him. There was a laptop computer open on the table. Right now, the laptop is in sleep mode, and there's nothing on the monitor. But just before Kano came in, Shizuo was browsing an internet forum. He takes his user handle from a nickname for the apples he grows on his own farm, which are pretty little things and nearly as sweet as honey. Let me guess, this is going to be the forum for people 50 or over who are fans of that Ayakamiki idol, right? The waitress came to take Kano's order, so he asked for an iced coffee. What are you using the computer for? Kano asked. I'm on the internet. Shizuo's voice was low and gruff. This cafe has an internet connection. May as well start with a little small talk. So what? Again, Shizuo glared at Kano. The words wouldn't come. No, actually, this is no time to be making idle chit-chat. If they got infected with the virus, Rumi and Shizuo might die. Look, please, you need to leave Shibuya right away. Shizuo's face contorted with confusion. What are you talking about? Why? Kano wasn't sure if he should tell the truth or not. He was strictly prohibited from discussing a case with anyone outside the department. As a former policeman himself, Shizuo ought to understand full well the secrecy an investigation required. But it wasn't like he'd just up and leave town without a good reason. Please listen, Kano said. Yeah, I think this'll work better. He has a background with the police, so he'd know that we can't really tell him anything, but that if he's saying it like this, then it must be important. It's very important that you go, though I'm not at liberty to tell you why. Even if this was Rumi's father, Kano couldn't bring himself to leak secret information. His mind spun with regret. Well, I don't need your say-so, Shizuo huffed. I'm sick of this town anyway. Kano was a bit relieved to hear that. Does this have something to do with the case you're working? Huh? You're telling me to leave Shibuya. Does that have something to do with your case? Yes, Kano admitted. So, why don't you run off with Rumi then? Shizuo's tone was frank. Well, I mean... When Kano didn't have an answer handy, Shizuo let out a single, heavy sigh. Is your work important to you? He asked. Kano hesitated. Is it more important than Rumi? I think the right answer here is that his work is gonna be what helps protect Rumi, and hopefully a lot of others. Again, Shizuo cut Kano off as he waffled over how to answer. Me, I used to put my work before my family. There was no question in my mind that combating society's ills and solving cases was worth any price. And because of that, I did some pretty reckless things. Almost wound up dead more than once. Shizuo paused, a forlorn look in his eyes. My wife did nothing but worry about me. So much that I didn't even realize when she'd worried herself sick. I was so caught up in my work that I wasn't even there for her when she finally passed away. It was also very absurd of me. The waitress came by and set Kano's iced coffee on the table. It sat there, untouched, until Shizuo looked at it pointedly. With a tiny nod, Kano brought the cup to his lips. The bittersweet liquid was a balm to his parched throat. I told Rumi the same story, Shizuo continued. But I didn't tell her how absurd it was. I told her that her father only did what he had to do. He took a sip from his glass of water. Rumi, she's very much like her mother used to be. Their personalities are almost identical, and I don't want her to suffer the same way my wife did. Shizuo's fist clenched in his lap. What was it that made you become a detective in the first place? He asked. Well, at first I got the job because I thought it would make Rumi happy. And then also because I thought it'd make you like me, sir. It was the truth, but Shizuo simply chuckled. If your goal was to get me to like you, you may as well give up now. I'm sorry, sir, Kano said. I can't do that. Are you this stubborn around Rumi? Shizuo grumbled. I love your daughter, sir. I want to keep her safe. Make her happy. Why is that? Whenever I think about her, I just feel so amazing. I'm sure that you or anyone can empathize with that. Everyone has someone they want to protect who makes them feel that good. It's an admirable thing wanting to be a detective and protect the happiness of the people. That doesn't mean you need to ignore your own happiness in the process. What you say may be true, sir. Earlier today, my partner was stabbed, and today is his wife's birthday. Shizuo arched his brow. Is he gonna make it? We're not sure yet. Last I knew, he was in critical condition. This is why I keep saying that the life of a detective is... Shizuo's words trailed off into a lamenting murmur. Even so, Kano was unmoved. Dictum number 1. Never lose sight of what you're supposed to protect. Ever. What's that? Something that a senior detective I admire very much said. It's the fundamental guiding principle I've stuck to as a detective. But I was wrong about the real meaning behind it. My partner was stabbed. There are people I want to rescue. So much has happened, and now I finally understand what those words mean. When you see someone in trouble, you help them. That's not something a good detective does. It's something a good person does. Kano took a good long look at Shizuo's face. He had surprised himself, finding the words to speak his feelings so clearly, and he wondered what effect it had on the older man. I'm sure that from your perspective, as my future father-in-law, my being a detective means that I'm putting my life on the line. That's not entirely true. I can only be myself. This is the kind of person I am. I care about helping people. Even if I were a baker or a brewer, or a bookseller, I'd still act the same way. You're being ridiculous. A baker and a detective don't assume anywhere near the same risks. I suppose that's true. Kano fussed with his hair sheepishly. Shizuo grumbled. I think I see what kind of man you are now. He sounded oddly defeated. Which is why now is no time to just futz around. Kano sat up straighter at Shizuo's weighty tone. A detective needs more than just passion. A detective can't solve all his problems with sheer determination alone. But at the same time, he needs more than just the ability to coldly assess a situation. He needs the conviction to stick to a case when it might otherwise seem prudent to give up. There was something new in Shizuo's expression now, and a gleam in his eye that hadn't been there before. Kano almost felt like he was being sermonized by a senior officer. You got that? You don't need a cool mind, but a fiery spirit. A detective without both of those is worth nothing. Do you mind if I write that down in my notebook here? Look, Shizuo said, sounding suddenly embarrassed. Aren't you in a hurry? Don't you have to get back to your case? Yes, and sir, please, I need you and your daughter to leave Shibuya right away. Yeah, I hear you. Kano conjured up Rumi's face in his mind. There was a chance that he might never see her again. He forced the thought away as best he could. By the way, if I may ask, Shizuo said, what was it about Rumi that made you fall in love with her? What? Where's this coming from all of a sudden? Was it her looks? No, it wasn't just that. Kano found himself tongue-tied again. I mean, she is pretty cute. Even if this is my own daughter I'm talking about. Shizuo shocked him by grinning from ear to ear. Well, yes, she sure is, Kano replied. But it's more than just that. She's also very sweet and kind-hearted. Ah, she is, isn't she? Yeah, she really is. For the first time, Kano and Shizuo smiled at one another. You're a man who lets his emotions show on his face, Shizuo said. And for a detective, that's not so bad. Thank you, sir, Kano said. He bowed to Shizuo as he stood up from his seat. Never lose sight of what you're supposed to protect, huh? I like that. Wise words indeed. Kano turned to look back and then bowed deeply to Shizuo one last time. Alright, so we will end it there. So, until next time, take care, and I will see you then.